Hey Upper East Siders and my lovely glow-getters. Welcome back to my channel. We are continuing our day-by-day chronicle of the federal trial of Sean Puff Diddy Combs. Today marks day 7 of the trial, and it proved to be a pivotal and emotional day in court. In this episode, we'll break down everything that happened on day 7, from startling new revelations by an ex-assistant to an exotic dancer's testimony about freak-offs and the powerful, heart-wrenching statements from Cassie Ventura's mother, Regina Ventura. We'll also touch on new evidence introduced as the prosecution's case builds. Let's dive into the proceedings in chronological order. Assistant David James continues his testimony. Day 7 opened with the return of Combs' former personal assistant, David James, to the witness stand. James had begun his testimony earlier in the trial, and today he continued under direct examination by prosecutors. As Puff Diddy's one-time right-hand man, he worked for Combs from 2007 to 2009. James provided an insider's view of the star's secretive lifestyle and routines. James outlined his daily responsibilities as a personal assistant, tasks that went far beyond normal errands. He testified that one of his duties was handling advance preparations for Diddy's notorious private parties known as freak-offs. These were multi-day, drug-fueled sexual encounters that Combs allegedly orchestrated in various hotel suites. James described how he would stock hotel rooms with supplies at Combs' direction, items like lubricants, condoms, baby oil, and even bowls of water to warm the oils, so that everything was ready for Combs' guests and illicit activities. He did not use the term freak-off himself in court, but it was clear he was referring to the same lurid events that have been discussed throughout the trial. James even recalled one bizarre detail. He once saw Combs take an ecstasy pill that was shaped like former President Barack Obama's face, highlighting the extent and strangeness of Diddy's drug use. He testified that Combs often mixed various drugs, Percocet painkillers by day and ecstasy pills by night, and that he frequently observed his boss under the influence. When asked how regularly he witnessed Combs using illegal substances, James replied, "I'd say every day," suggesting that Diddy was high even during business meetings. James went on to share a disturbing first-hand experience from one of these hotel freak-off sessions. He described entering a hotel suite one day to find Cassie Ventura unconscious on the bed, with a naked man scrambling away from the scene. This shocking tableau confirmed the accounts that Cassie herself had given earlier in the trial, that Combs would orchestrate sexual encounters between her and male sex workers while he watched. James's testimony corroborated that such incidents did occur, painting a vivid picture of the aftermath of one such encounter. Cassie apparently passed out and a stranger hastily retreating. It was a sobering moment that visibly struck the courtroom, underscoring the exploitative nature of these freak-off parties. Beyond the salacious details, David James also recounted why he ultimately left Combs' employment. He testified that a 2009 incident convinced him he had to quit for his own safety. In that incident, later known as the Mel's Diner confrontation, Combs armed himself with 3 handguns and ordered James to drive him, along with a bodyguard, to a restaurant in Los Angeles to confront rap mogul Suge Knight. Earlier that evening, Combs' security had spotted Suge Knight, a longtime industry rival, at the diner and allegedly saw someone hand Knight a gun. Diddy, in a fury, decided to confront him immediately. James told the jury how he found himself ferrying his boss, who was bristling with weapons, to what could have been a deadly showdown in a public place. Thankfully, no violence ultimately took place, but that night was a turning point. James realized that being Sean Combs' assistant meant potentially putting his own life in danger, and shortly after, he resigned from the job. On cross-examination, Combs' defense team pressed David James about this dramatic story. James acknowledged that he had not initially disclosed the full Mel's Diner incident to prosecutors during pretrial interviews. In fact, he revealed that when he first tried to recount the episode, government attorneys interrupted him and cautioned him not to say anything that might incriminate himself. After all, driving an armed man to a confrontation could implicate James in potential wrongdoing. This admission on cross-exam slightly tempered the impact of his testimony. The defense implied that James might be holding back details or that prosecutors steered him away from topics that could cast him in a bad light. Nonetheless, his overall testimony remained very damaging to Combs. It portrayed the defendant as a man deeply enmeshed in illicit drugs, risky sexual exploits, and violent grudges, all facilitated by those in his entourage. The Punisher, an exotic dancer's account of the freak-offs. After David James stepped down, the prosecution called another striking working witness to reinforce Cassie's allegations about the freak-off sex parties. Sheree Hayes, an exotic dancer who goes by the stage name The Punisher, took the stand. Hayes is a male dancer whom prosecutors identified as one of the paid participants in Combs' orchestrated sexual encounters. His testimony provided an outside perspective on those secret sessions and added corroboration to Cassie's story of coercion. Sheree The Punisher Hayes testified that Sean Combs and Cassie Ventura drew him into the world of the freak-offs on multiple occasions. According to Hayes, between 2012 and 2016, he was invited several times to perform sexual acts with Cassie in luxury hotel rooms, while Combs sat and watched. He described in detail how these encounters were arranged and what the atmosphere was like. For instance, Hayes recalled entering the hotel suite and noticing the same supplies David James had mentioned, bottles of baby oil warmed in bowls of hot water, for example, clearly prepared in advance for the rendezvous. It was immediately apparent to him that these gatherings were pre-planned and facilitated by Combs' staff. Hayes testified that during each session, he was paid in cash at the end of the encounter. Cassie herself would hand him an envelope of money, typically between $1,200 and $2,000 US for each performance. It's presumed that Combs supplied this cash, essentially paying male sex workers to entertain Cassie and fulfill his staged fantasies. The presence of these envelopes of cash lines up with the prosecution's narrative that Diddy financed and choreographed these prolonged orgies, treating them like transactions. As Hayes recounted the encounters, he provided insight into Cassie Ventura's demeanor and Combs' role during the act. He said that Sean Combs was often directing Cassie on what to do next with Hayes. Cassie generally complied with Combs' commands, but Hayes observed that she sometimes let out sighs or looked hesitant, as if she were uneasy with what was happening. Other times, however, Hayes noted that Cassie appeared to be into it and enjoying herself. This nuanced observation by the Punisher gave the jury a complex picture. Cassie was not always visibly resisting. At times, she acted as though the encounters were consensual, at least on the surface. The defense seized on this point during cross-examination. Diddy's attorney pressed Sheree Hayes on whether he believed Cassie was a willing participant. Hayes responded that from his perspective, nothing obviously non-consensual occurred in front of him. It seemed like there was consent there as far as I was concerned, he told the courtroom when asked directly about Cassie's behavior. This statement bolstered the defense's contention that any sexual activities involving Cassie were voluntary and that her claims of being coerced or terrorized by Combs might be overstated. Hayes admitted that he only saw what happened during the sessions he was involved in. He couldn't speak to what pressures Cassie might have been under behind closed doors, but his testimony did lend some support to the idea that Cassie sometimes went along with these encounters without open protest. Nonetheless, the prosecution benefited from Hayes' testimony as well. By confirming that these freak-off sessions did in fact take place, and in essentially the way Cassie described, Hayes corroborated key elements of the government's case. He verified that Combs orchestrated and paid for sexual liaisons between Cassie and other men, reinforcing the accusation that Diddy ran a decade-long scheme of sexual exploitation and trafficking. His description of Cassie sighing under Combs' orders also hinted at her discomfort, aligning with her portrayal of herself as essentially trapped and complying out of fear. In sum, Sheree The Punisher Hayes provided a dramatic first-hand account that both sides will likely reference. The prosecution to prove the lurid events happened at Diddy's behest, and the defense to argue that Cassie was an active participant rather than a victim. Regina Ventura's emotional testimony, A Mother's Anguish. The most powerful moment of Day 7 came when Cassie Ventura's mother, Regina Ventura, took the stand. Regina's testimony was relatively brief, but it left a deep impression on everyone present. Speaking as a mother and witness to the aftermath of Diddy's alleged abuse of her daughter, Regina provided heart-wrenching details and confirmed an episode of apparent extortion by Sean Combs. Regina Ventura recounted an incident from late 2011 that illustrated the lengths to which Combs would go in a fit of jealousy and rage. At that time, Cassie had begun a new relationship with another man, later revealed to be rapper Kid Cudi, after her tumultuous years with Diddy. When Sean Combs discovered that Cassie was seeing someone else, he became enraged. Regina testified that in December 2011, Combs contacted her and demanded $20,000 in cash, claiming this sum would repay money he had spent on Cassie during their relationship. It was essentially a revenge demand. Combs was furious about Cassie's disloyalty and wanted to punish her financially, but it didn't stop at just demanding money. Regina revealed that Diddy threatened her family sweet in a terrifying way, he told Regina that if the money wasn't paid, he would release explicit sex videos he had of Cassie and would even have someone harm Cassie physically. In court, Regina described the shock and fear she felt upon receiving these threats. She had emails from Cassie around that time, which were shown to the jury, in which Cassie confided to her mother that Combs was menacing her, threatening to leak intimate tapes of her and insinuating he could hurt her through others. The prosecution even presented photographs that Regina had taken in 2011, showing Cassie with bruises on her legs and back. Regina took those photos herself to document the abuse her daughter had suffered. Looking at those images in the courtroom, one could imagine the distress and protective rage Cassie's mother must have felt back then. Her body was bruised and I wanted to document it, Regina said, explaining why she felt compelled to snap those pictures of Cassie's injuries. The photos were shown to the jurors as Regina spoke, lending grim visual proof to the accounts of violence we've heard throughout the trial. Regina's voice trembled slightly as she continued her testimony. She recalled how horrified and sickened she was by Combs's threatening message. In fact, she told the jury that reading Diddy's email made her feel physically sick. The combination of fear for her daughter's safety and the sheer audacity of Combs' extortion attempt was overwhelming. I was scared for my daughter's safety, Regina testified, her words bringing a hush over the courtroom. Through a mother's eyes, we saw the real-life stakes of Diddy's alleged crimes, not just tabloid scandal, but the genuine terror inflicted on a family. Desperate to protect Cassie, Regina and her husband decided they had no choice but to comply with Combs' demand. Regina testified that she and Cassie's father went so far as to take out a loan against their home to raise the $20,000 that Combs had insisted on. We took a home equity loan, and that was the only way we could get the money, she said, describing how they essentially mortgaged their house to gather the payoff. This statement illustrated the extreme measures the Ventura family took under duress. They put their own financial security on the line out of fear of what Diddy might do next. It's hard not to imagine the anguish and helplessness they felt, facing a billionaire celebrity's wrath, dealing with their daughter's injuries, and scrambling to literally buy her safety. Regina then revealed a surprising coda to this ordeal. A few days after they paid Diddy the $20,000, the money was suddenly returned to them. Combs gave the money back. It's unclear why. Perhaps he cooled off or decided not to follow through, but the damage was already done. The point of Regina's story was clear. Sean Combs had terrorized and extorted them, even if he ultimately didn't keep the cash. The emotional and psychological toll of those events could not be undone. Notably, the defense team did not cross-examine Regina Ventura at all. They chose to ask her no questions. This could have been a strategic decision. Perhaps Combs' lawyers calculated that challenging a sympathetic mother on the stand would only make them look callous, or maybe they felt her testimony was too unassailable to dent. In any case, Regina stepped down from the witness stand without the defense attempting to poke holes in her account. Her testimony hung in the air, powerful and unchallenged. For the jurors, and those of us following the trial, Regina Ventura's appearance was a poignant reminder of the real human cost behind the allegations. It wasn't just about a music mogul and his ex-girlfriend. It was about a mother fearing for her child's life. Regina's brave, candid testimony reinforced Cassie's claims from a familial perspective, lending credibility and emotional weight to the prosecution's case. Many observing the trial felt that this was one of the most compelling moments so far. The courtroom was reportedly silent as she spoke, with even Sean Combs averting his gaze during parts of her account. New evidence, firearms, and the day's conclusion. Toward the end of day 7, after the dramatic witness testimonies, the focus shifted to some physical evidence in the case. The prosecution called Gerard Gannon, a special agent with the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, to the stand. Agent Gannon has been involved in the investigation of Combs and was prepared to introduce evidence gathered during searches of Diddy's properties. On this afternoon, Agent Gannon showed the jury parts of 2 AR-15 rifles that federal agents had recovered last year while executing a search warrant at Combs' Miami mansion on Star Island. These semi-automatic rifle components were displayed in the courtroom, marking a noticeable shift from the emotional testimony of prior witnesses to hard, tangible evidence of alleged criminal activity. Jurors observed the rifle parts as Agent Gannon explained where and how they were found. The implication is that Combs may have illegally possessed these firearms, since as a person facing serious charges, and given other circumstances, he would not lawfully be allowed such weapons. This introduction of firearms evidence suggests that the prosecution is broadening the scope of the trial to include Combs's alleged involvement in weapons offenses, or at least to paint a fuller picture of his misconduct, beyond the direct victim testimony, the sight of weapon parts in court, also reinforced the narrative of Combs leading a dangerous lifestyle, recalling earlier testimony about armed confrontations and threats. It's one thing to hear about violence, it's another to see actual rifle pieces that were in his possession. Agent Gannon's testimony on day 7 was mostly procedural and descriptive, setting the stage for more detailed evidence to come. In fact, it appears his full presentation would continue on the next trial day. Court adjourned for day 7 after this initial look at the firearms, with the judge instructing jurors to return for day 8, where the agent's testimony about the search and weapons would resume. And so concluded day 7, a day filled with both sensational revelations and heartfelt testimony. From David James's insider stories of decadence and danger, to Sheree Hayes' confirmation of twisted parties, to Regina Ventura's moving account of a mother's worst nightmares, the prosecution added many pieces to their puzzle. Each witness in their own way corroborated the overarching allegations that Sean Diddy Combs lived a life of extraordinary excess and control, and that when anyone close to him stepped out of line, he responded with intimidation or worse. The defense, for its part, gained a few points from Hayes' consent remarks, and by highlighting a gap in James's disclosures, but they largely had to watch the day's damaging testimony unfold. Before we sign off, it's worth reflecting on how pivotal Regina Ventura's testimony could be. Her words likely resonated on a personal level with the jury. It's one thing to hear Cassie, the primary accuser, tell her story. It's another to hear a parent verify parts of that story and describe the collateral damage inflicted on a family. Day 7 has humanized the case more than ever, underscoring that the outcome of this trial matters not just in terms of celebrity gossip, but for the victims and their loved ones seeking justice. Thank you for watching and following our coverage. Stay tuned for Day 8's recap, and as always, we will be here to guide you through all the developments in this ongoing trial.